So, Namaskar and good evening, everybody. Professor Mani welcoming you on behalf of the Bombay Management Association. We think back when we started this learning journey online on the digital platform way back in April, and we are equally delighted to share that today we enter the 9th month of this learning journey, where so many of you have regularly come in almost many of the Wednesdays and been part of these learning sessions, be it on areas related to management, self-development, finance, spirituality, wellness, and so on. Today, we have yet another interesting dimension as we enter the 9th month of our Wednesday Wisdom webinar, which started in the first week of April. We have a very special session today, which is going to focus on what is the new experience at the airport. How does one travel safely across the country? What are some of the protocols to be followed? And how does one ensure that when we move from lockdown to unlock, we are still able to manage to do our personal visits and official visits as comfortably as possible? To give us a lot of wisdom in this area, we are indeed very blessed and fortunate to have Mr. Videh Jaipuriar with us. He is the CEO of the Delhi International Airport Limited, a person with a very great stature in this industry, with a career spanning over 3 decades. We are very happy that we could have the privilege of hosting Mr. Videh this evening on the platform of Bombay Management Association, though digitally. As we rightly feel, digital connects us as well as otherwise, except that you may not physically meet, but I think digital meeting still gives us an opportunity to learn. Thank you, Videhji, for willingly coming to be part of our Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I welcome you on behalf of the entire BMA family, several of our past presidents who have graced the occasion here. And I'd like to request my colleague on the executive committee of BMA, Vaijayanti Nayak, who facilitated our interaction with Videh and introduced us to him, to please introduce him formally to our entire participants. And then I'd request Videh to begin. Over to you, Vaijayanti.
Thank you, Professor Mani. Hello, Videh. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Professor Mani, I must say that, because Videh is giving his session in Mumbai, you made him a Mumbaikar by calling him Jaipurkar.
Okay.
But
Okay.
small
Yeah.
correction, he
Yeah,
is
right.
Videh Kumar Jaipuriar. And, another little interesting thing about him is we are batchmates from JBIMS. Both of us are the 86-88 batch. Of course, Videh has had an illustrious career, 3 decades. He's been the Chief Executive Officer of Delhi International Airport since December 2017. And I'm sure it's been one hell of a ride for him, especially during the COVID times. And he has several interesting experiences, stories, his learnings, and the new things that he has done as the CEO of DIAL. Before joining DIAL, he served as the Managing Director of Jubilant Industries Limited. And before that, he worked with other organizations like Bunge India, Blowplast Limited, and Britannia Industries Limited. Like I said, my batchmate from JBIMS 86-88 batch and a BTech from IIT Delhi. So he's your typical IIT MBA combination. And he has huge experience, be it B2C, B2C, B2B, and including retail. So I don't want to take too much of anybody's time. Over to you, Videh, and welcome to this session.
Thank you, Vaijayanti. Thank you, Professor Mani, for very kind words. So yes, it has been quite a journey. I have been with DIAL for last 3 years, and out of that, last 1 year has been a very, very interesting journey, to say the least. Because in the last 9 to 10 months, the kind of issues that whole aviation sector has faced, that actually has brought in a lot of learnings, and lot of learnings specifically about crisis management. So what I will do is that I will just share different lessons that we learned at the airport in the context of overall crisis management framework, and how we have gone about actually addressing each of the issues that actually arose because there was a suspension of overall air travel for a period of time before it got resumed. So I have got a short presentation. It is about 30 slides, but many of them are photographs because I just wanted to share with you some of the things that we have done at the airport. And I will take you through that. After that, you're most welcome to ask questions. I would be happy to share more and more experiences. So I will just share my screen with you. Okay, so I will share with you managing the airport experience effectively in current crisis times. In fact, airports are not a place which don't know about crisis. There is every day some crisis or the other that happens at an airport. If a passenger actually gets misses a flight, it's a crisis. If there is an emergency landing, it's a crisis. But the kind of crisis that we have faced this time is unprecedented in aviation history. What has happened? First of all, as soon as COVID breakout was announced across the world, there were various set of guidelines for Ministry of Civil Aviation, Ministry of Health, which kept on getting changed almost on a daily basis in terms of screening of incoming international passengers, and they were restricted to 2 countries to start off with. Then they were actually expanded to more number of countries. And with this, we had to keep on changing the airport operation because as you all might be aware that airport operation is not to hold back passengers. We don't have that kind of a holding capacity that I hold back passengers, put them through a particular process before we allow them to go out. So it had huge pressure on the infrastructure because even if an average passenger was taking 5 minutes time for going through the medical screening, in an aircraft, domestic aircraft, 150 is the average load. In international, it's even 250. So if you can just look at 250 into 5, about 1250. So effectively, even if you have 5 counters, it would take 5 to 6 hours. And that is what we experienced initially. Initially, we actually were stuck with situation where people had to wait even 12 hours, 13 hours inside the airport. While we understand the kind of problems that they went through, but it was also a huge stress on our overall infrastructure. We actually did things to help passengers stay more and more comfortable, but fact is that nobody wants to stay inside the airport after they have arrived at the destination. We were able to ease it out by actually doing a lot of things with all the stakeholders, because as you might be aware that airports are not run by only airport companies. Airport companies typically have got only about 10 to 15% of the staff working at the airport. Close to 80-85% of the staff are people with whom you have got non-reporting relations. So you have to get all those stakeholders, whether they are airlines people or CISF or immigration or customs, you have to get all of them together to make any change in the way that you process the passengers. And finally, international and domestic operations were stopped on March 23, international, and 25th domestic. And they resumed, especially the domestic flights resumed only after 2 months. So 2 months of complete shutdown of passenger operations. However, Delhi airport never stopped functioning because we had a lot of other things to do, including getting medical supplies to different parts of the country. So we actually operated 24/7. We had a lot of evacuation flights coming from different countries, for which also we had to keep our terminal operations also going. So there is no bigger crisis where we used to have close to 2 lakh passengers, 1 lakh arrival, 1 lakh departure, suddenly becoming 200. because there were only evacuation flights. It was something which was really shocking to everybody in the aviation sector. And when we were going to the airport, we were feeling that it's something that we possibly had never expected, never anticipated. So we had a huge crisis in front of us, and like any human event, there are various stages of a crisis, which is identifiable sequence of events. And these stages actually help us manage risk, progress, target stakeholders, and take appropriate actions. If I just look at the MITROPS stages of crisis management model, avoiding crisis is something that we couldn't have done because crisis was outsourced. Preparing to manage crisis, this we do all the time, but this was unprecedented. So this was something which was not part of our crisis management manual. So then we were left with defining the crisis, containing the crisis, managing the crisis, and finally we had to put down what were the various learnings from this crisis. Because this might not be the last crisis, this kind of a crisis that we have faced. So we have to have this learnings which are properly documented. But in times of crisis, it is of utmost importance to keep one's head. So you have to actually keep your head, you have to get things under control and get your team to work towards making sure that whatever you is within your control, you are able to manage. So we said, okay, let's define the crisis, where all it can have impact. It definitely has impact on employee and stakeholder health and safety. There is huge financial impact because airports earn money only if there are airlines operations and only when there are passengers going to the terminals. Whole operation was completely disturbed, and passenger safety was something was of prime concern to passengers as well as the airports. So we had to prepare, respond, and make sure that we emerge stronger. Agility in leading with purpose and integrity. So this was our COVID-19 response framework. Understanding the total impact of the crisis, categorization of impacts into 4 key elements, dimensions: team health and safety, financial resilience, operation management, stakeholder management, which is very, very important. So we had to establish our approach, set priorities, base in immediate crisis response decisions on established facts, and empowering the team who are on the ground to make swift execution at ground. We started by actually forming a war room. We had all the senior members, including me, as part of that war room. It was a very structured platform where we were discussing on all these 4 dimensions. We were getting information from all the sources, and we were deciding on the future course of action. So it was a daily meeting to start off with, which we later on reduced the frequency of this. If we look at team health and safety, because this is something which was of prime importance to us, because you have to have a healthy and productive team in place to be executing whatever you want to execute. So first thing we did was that we created a centralized COVID response and management cell for our employees and their relatives, which was a 24/7 emergency management center. So there, anybody who was facing any crisis in terms of getting infected or anybody in the family getting infected could call. And we had tied up with hospitals, we had tied up with ambulances. In fact, we had taken 2 ambulances on hire on a permanent basis so that respective people are immediately shifted to the hospitals that we have tied up with, and medical services, hospitalization, even transportation, because as you might be aware, during the lockdown, now, how do people travel to the airport? Fact is that you still had airport operations running. We had to basically interact with all the administrative people, the DMs, the secretaries, to actually get a special passes issued and airport services be declared as a essential service. Then in terms of social support, psychological well-being, because a lot of people were very stressed out, especially the employees, because they didn't know what is going to happen to the company, what is going to happen to the overall operation. We had made arrangement even for accommodation, because there are certain set of people without whom an airport cannot run. You can't operate a runway unless you have got sufficient number of fire people. So we actually made arrangement so that they can stay there overnight in case there is any disruption in terms of them coming to the work. And most importantly, we actually kept on getting in touch with all the employees, sharing with them what is the update on COVID, what are the various arrangements that we have done for COVID, announcement, and most importantly, getting the team engaged, because suddenly people who have been going to the office on a regular basis, they find that they are working from home. So we had actually regular interaction, what we call as GMR warriors, working during the COVID-19 senior leadership. In fact, our group chairman, Mr. GM Rao himself, and the business chairman, they actually addressed all these people to keep their morale high, because you have got family pressure that how will you go to office when there is so much of problem of COVID, and still they were reporting for work. So they needed that moral support. This is something that really helped us. Wins over worries was a series of interaction that senior people had with our employees, where they shared that in these times of crisis, what have they done to overcome the crisis, which was again another morale booster. And these are the times when you actually start emphasizing on values, that it will be, we shared that what are our different values and how you actually can bring it into your personal life also. Virtual learning sessions were increased because this was a time where possibly people had some free time to acquire new skills. And we actually encouraged them to become part of a solution, because there were certain problems that we used to actually we used to come across in our war room. So we used to throw it open to all the employees to come out with solutions. In fact, we had done an employee engagement survey just before the crisis, and we have done it just last month. Our employee engagement score actually has gone up in spite of 50% of the people working from home. Then financial resilience. Obviously, with no traffic at the airport, we had a complete revenue drought. Our concessionaires and partners also were facing financial crisis. Typically, airports have got very huge, very high fixed operating cost, because you still have got establishment that needs to run. If you are running a terminal, you still will have possibly all the costs there except electricity in certain areas. And there was this uncertainty of resumption. So we took a balanced approach, because during these times, it was very, very important that we actually manage cash very effectively, because nobody knew how long it's going to continue. So we actually went through a lot of cost reduction measures, one of which was actually from 3 terminals, we consolidated operation in 1 terminal, which was not only cost efficient, but also efficient in terms of managing health protocols. We renegotiated contracts. We had long-term partners, and these were the times when we actually went back to them that you have earned from us all these years. This is the time that when we are in crisis and we need your support. And most of them actually responded. We put all capital expenditure, which were avoidable, on hold. All discretionary expenditure were cut. All travel, all other discretionary expenditure, we actually just put a stop to. We also said that whatever help we can give to our commercial concessionaires, typically commercial concessionaires work on a minimum monthly guarantee or revenue share, whichever is higher. So we actually said, okay, minimum monthly guarantee we will forego, because at least whatever business you do, only for that you give me a revenue share. And we supported all the F&B and retail partners by actually doing promotional campaign for touchless transaction. In terms of operations management, now this was something which was a huge task, because this is where you have got different stakeholders involved, and you had government stakeholders from Ministry of Civil Aviation, Ministry of Health. So in terms of actually formulating SOP for resumption, that was one big task, because we had to coordinate with everybody. We had to actually get the draft done. Then they were walked through by different stakeholders that whatever we are saying is correct. And for this, in fact, we got in touch with our other international airport partners, as well as we got in touch with some epidemiologists to understand that what is it going to be if I reopen, because that was important. We had to make sure that the risk of infection in the airport ecosystem is minimized. We had to look at the airport indoor air quality, because the epidemiologist actually told us that that is going to be the biggest source of transmission of infection. And we had to make sure that capacity we optimize, because with social distancing norms in place, how do you make sure that you are optimizing your capacity? Besides that, we had to also operate as a hub for supply of medical equipments, testing kits across the world. So across India. So how do you actually work that out? So this is something that we worked with the help of all the government stakeholders, airlines partners, as well as other concessionaires, that you have to make the whole feeling, whole experience as safe as possible. In fact, our teams came out with very innovative solutions, because all the factories were shut down. So if you had to have a sanitizing tunnel to be made, we actually did it in-house. If there was bag sanitization to be done, we had all the things done in-house. If there was a sanitization of shoe sanitization that needs to be done, we actually innovated it in-house. And essential supplies cargo, I have already talked about. Then next was passengers and stakeholders, people who are working at the airport, as well as passengers who are walking in. Now their worry was that what is the fresh air inside, because there were a lot of news about air conditioning actually transmitting the disease across. So we actually changed our overall air circulation system. Now we have got in our Terminal 3 fresh air intake. Every 10 minutes, complete air gets changed. And all air is disinfected using UV lamp as well as HEPA filters. I can safely claim that we are the best in class in terms of public building, possibly the best in India in terms of the quality of air inside. Then once you have got physical distancing norms, however, your other processes, that speed remains the same. So then one of the key things was that how do you create holding area for passengers so that your processing speed doesn't go down. So that was done very aggressively to make sure that we maintain the social distancing as well as don't lose the capacity. Thermal screening, from manual screening to even camera-based screening, we explored all of them and we actually put them in place. Change of gates by airlines to make sure that there are not too many cross flows of passengers so that passenger interaction comes down. Queue management through technology, queue management by putting markers, and even isolation room to evacuate symptomatic suspects, anybody who has got higher temperature. In fact, later date, we became the first airport in India with RT-PCR testing facility at airport premises. Then infection for passengers and stakeholders, we also made sure that there is less and less face-to-face interaction. So for CISF checkpoint, putting plexiglass partitions, contactless check-in by using a scan and fly, where you don't have to actually carry any physical printout. You just come and actually show your mobile and you can get a printout of your boarding pass if you want. Intelligent CUS, e-processing. So we actually had got the overall process changed where you don't need any stamping, and even the security can be processed with your mobile. We, as I have shared earlier, that shoe sanitizing mats, sanitizer, auto dispensers, touchless water fountains, all water fountains we changed to touchless. All these are beyond mandatory protocols. Using UV and plasma for baggage disinfection, outreach and engagement with cargo stakeholders. We created e-gate pass for all the cargo delivery at Delhi airport, because earlier there was physical gate pass that was actually given. Social distance marking and completely contactless commerce where there is no need to exchange money. Then, as I told you, that stakeholders are very, very important part of the overall airport operation, because 85% of the people working at the airport are not directly DIAL employees. So we had to actually collaborate with them, made sure that all their concerns, all their issues are resolved, because they need to be equally confident of airport operation as us, so that they are able to function properly. Visible communication, we had a Fly Safe campaign, we had on our website dedicated COVID section, and even on our social media, we said that we will respond as quickly as possible. In fact, our first response time was less than 10 minutes. So you ask any question on social media and you get a first response within first 10 minutes. We facilitated cross-agency collaboration and joint review of safety and commercial measures. We made sure that whatever we have done, we keep on communicating it through different media, whether it is press, social media, on ground, emails. This was an imperative, because we have to get the stakeholders' confidence. We have to build consumer confidence in flying. Some of the examples, very innovatively done, which is very eye-catching. We also had certain communication with the stakeholders, where we had a webinar where we shared, we had a minister actually coming, we had airlines head coming, we had even head of AIMS coming, and actually talking to all the stakeholders, talking to people to repose their confidence, their faith in flying. So with this, what we have seen, and this is something that we do on a continuous basis, the passenger survey we do on a continuous basis. While we started with about 90 to 85% confidence level, today I can comfortably say that 99% of the people who have gone through Delhi airport feel safe traveling through Delhi airport. And that is, we also see in the frequency of their travel. In fact, today, for business travel, more than 50% of the people are repeat travelers. So that is something which actually underlines that whatever measures that we have taken are something that have been appreciated. And this has also actually given us various accolades worldwide also. We have been rated as the second safest airport in the world. We have got ACI, which is the Airport Council International Airport Health Accreditation. So with all this, we were able to ensure that there is no or minimum disruption in passenger journey. We are safe, rated safe by more than 99% now. We kept on handling all the evacuation flights, more than 6 lakh evacuations we have handled. We have alleviated the risk of infection and transmission, consolidated passenger operations, serving primary and trusted hubs, import cargo. So today, in terms of market share, we are handling almost 45% of India's international service, international traffic, and 30% of domestic traffic. Thank you.
Truly outstanding, Videh. I think this is truly inspirational. Let me, on behalf of everyone present here, first congratulate you and your team for being rated the second safest airport, which is what you said in such a humble manner. But I can see the effort that has gone into this whole accolade that you have won. entirely based on the wonderful work that you all had done. So compliments once again, and thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation. There are lots of questions coming in, and I'll be happy to share some of them with you. Just one question that comes out of curiosity: which airport was rated the first in the safest category?
Singapore, but they don't handle any passenger currently.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, all right. So then I guess you must have two categories, which is the safest airport after handling a lot of passengers versus not handling passengers at all, as you had just mentioned out here. Wonderful. So I'm taking up some of the questions, and let me just bring these up to you. Did you face some resistance from your employees themselves in the initial stages in reporting to work? And how did you tackle some of these? Because this is common experience elsewhere too. So let's hear from you.
Yes, more than the employees, we faced more resistance from their family members. We had cases where the family, a daughter of an employee calls up the HR head and says that, why are you asking my father to come to office in such times? So how we managed was through communication, because we actually then sent out detailed list of measures that we have taken to ensure that our employees remain safe while they are at the airport. In fact, I even came, I had a video which we circulated to all the family members where we actually thanked all the people who have worked during these COVID times. That is something that really helped.
Sure, I understand that confidence building and that spirit of selfless service, I guess, would have made a lot of difference. But that is truly exemplary. Would you also like to share, though this is slightly beyond the domain of the airport, a lot of people feel airports are safe, but aircrafts are not as safe. Do you have a view on that?
Yes. And I have got some airlines people also I could see in the audience.
Yes.
So whatever is the actual understanding is that airlines also are equally safe as most of the airports. The reason is that basic worry that people have while flying is that the air inside aircraft actually circulates and stays inside the aircraft, which is not correct. In fact, inside the aircraft, you have got fresh air circulated almost every 1 minute, because while burning the fuel, it actually sucks in air, which actually gets heated up on the way in. And that is what actually comes from bottom and goes to the top. So that is something that ensures that air is always safe inside the aircraft. So inside an aircraft, if you are wearing a mask, I think it's good enough mask, because you are sitting very close to the next person. While Government of India came out with a mandate that the person sitting in the center will have to wear a complete PPE kit, personally, and it's completely my personal opinion, I don't think that is necessary. In fact, that is more detracts people and scares them from traveling. But actually, from medical point of view, it is as safe as not wearing a PPE.
Okay, I understand. Would you also throw a little more light on what are some of the steps you have now initiated, considering that traffic is slowly on the rise? Would you also share with us what kind of percentage of traffic have you seen increasing, say, over the last 1 month? And what specific steps have you taken to manage the customer experience?
Right. So I will break it into two parts. One is domestic, another is international. So domestic, currently we have about 50% of the passengers back. So we had actually worked out the capacity with one terminal, that without compromising on the safety measures, how much of traffic we can handle. So as soon as we saw that the traffic was going beyond that, we have opened another terminal also, terminal 2. And with all the safety measures that we actually took in terminal 1, in terminal 3. Second thing that we did was that some of the measures we actually brought in more and more technology, because then we had a breathing time. So we were actually able to bring in a lot of other newer technologies. So whether it is social distancing, so measurement of basically the density index. We in our airport have got a system which is called a Jovis system, which is primarily, which was used for queue management, which was give me that what is the waiting time for each of the queue. We worked with the vendor to develop a PDI, so a personal density index. So in any area where there is higher number of people, it actually shows a red zone over there where then our people can go and make sure that that distancing is managed. Secondly, in terms of even the processing of passengers, some of the activities which were manual that we actually converted into automatic, and we are still in the process of doing that, which has helped us because then you don't have queuing. And once you have queuing, the typical mindset of all of us in India is that can I go ahead of the other guy? And that is what actually causes the loss of physical distancing. So all these measures has really helped us.
Okay, that's interesting. The other question that is related to this is it safe to take an international flight considering that in a duration of say 12 to 16 hours, what would happen in the event that someone is found to be infected? I know it's hypothetical, but this is a scare which many people have. I thought it's worth asking you based on your own experiences.
Okay, I don't have an experience, but I have an understanding, because if somebody is found symptomatic, in any case, even in aircraft, they have got a defined row where they actually shift them to. And as I told you that if your air circulation is changing repeatedly, in that case, even today, the medical fraternity actually advises that in case you don't have very serious symptoms, you can stay at home. You're doing it at home and isolating yourself. So till the time you have that isolation area, which is well defined, it should not be a problem.
Okay. And what further steps do you think airports are planning to take to increase the passenger traffic? Because I believe passengers and individuals wish to travel, but it's that fear that is keeping them back. I would also believe this is more the responsibility of the airline than the airport, but then the starting point is the airport. So some of your views, please.
Professor Mani, it is responsibility of everybody in the aviation sector.
Sure.
And in fact, we have been working together, because actually, if you look at the profile of people, and we do profiling on a regular basis, pre-COVID, I had close to about 39 to 40% of the people traveling for holidays, and 60 at Delhi airport, and 61% of the people were either business traveler or visiting friends and relatives. So what has happened that currently the other two segments, which is basically the business travel as well as visiting friends and relatives, that almost 80% of the people are back. It's the holiday seekers who are not back at all, because that is something which is discretionary. So what we are trying to do is that how do we work with Travel and Tourism, Federation of Travel and Tourism? We have formed a task force which includes airport, airlines, hotel associations, travel operators, and we are working with different ministries. Because if I look at international travel, first there was this requirement of quarantine, that anybody who comes in has to undergo a 7 days institutional quarantine and 7 days home quarantine. So first we got that changed by convincing different ministries that if somebody comes with RT-PCR negative test, then he is as risky as anybody else that is roaming around on the road. So you should not insist on even home quarantine, because only then tourist arrival will happen. So that has happened just only about 10 days back. We got that thing changed. Next was opening up tourist visas. Now, opening up tourist visas is something which has to be bilateral. So right now we are talking to different countries. In fact, we are planning a meeting with all the ambassadors of the targeted countries and work out a health protocol. And that is where the international body like Airport Council International is working with WHO to work a health protocol which is acceptable on both the sides. Because unless that is agreed upon, the tourist visa on both the sides will not get opened. On the domestic side, we are trying to work with different online travel platforms that, okay, can we create a product where you can talk about that whole aircraft is going to, suppose, Delhi to Goa. So all of them are holiday seekers. All of them are tested at least antigen. So you are risk-free in that particular aircraft. And then the travel association takes care when you land over there in Goa to make sure that it's a risk-free journey. So some of these things we are working on.
All right, that's very appreciable because as you rightly said, unless the tourist traffic increases, still we will see the percentage levels around 50% is what you had broadly indicated at this given point in time. Another question is with so much of work from home announcements initially which were mandated, and over the last couple of months, a lot of people and organizations look at that as the future of work for their organizations. Do you really see that impacting air travel? What would be your views?
To a certain extent, yes. But if I give you a trend in the last 10 years, business travel as a percentage of overall travel had been coming down. So it is hastened a little bit. However, the other segment, which was actually increasing more and more because of affordability in air travel, was visiting friends and relatives, as well as holiday seekers. Because younger crowd wants to travel more and more. Visiting friends and relatives, which was once an year phenomena, is increasing to possibly twice or even thrice a year. So that is something which was driving the growth. And most of these growths were driven by non-metro locations. So there will be a change in the overall profile of people traveling. However, looking at the kind of growth that aviation was seeing pre-COVID, where on an average in the last 5 years, we had grown by 14%. And we are looking at actually doubling our overall footfall in next 5 to 7 years. That will get slowed. Maybe it will come to 10%, but there are still very low penetration level of air travel. So that is something which is definitely going to increase.
All right. There are some of us in this audience who are keen to travel abroad. Would you share what is the current scenario about visas and protocols and some of your updated information on that, please?
Yes. See, one has to actually look at individual country-wise requirement because different countries have got different requirements. Say, for example, if you go to Europe, most of the places you won't be given a tourist visa. In fact, there are no new visas that are getting issued. But if you're going to the US, whatever visa you have, you can travel over there. There is no mandatory requirement of even RT-PCR testing in most of the states in the US. UK is going to come out with mandatory testing protocol. Dubai has got a mandatory testing protocol. So it depends from different countries to countries in terms of visa restrictions, in terms of medical protocol. So that is where we are looking at standardizing with the help of ACI and IATA. Both of them are working together with WHO and ICAO to actually have a common health protocol that will ease things a little bit. But no issues in terms of most of the countries other than Far East, like Singapore is completely closed. Bangkok, we are talking about in terms of reopening. Australia is completely closed, but USA, no problems. Europe, if you have a existing visa, if you have got a permanent residence visa, no problems. So it is very country specific currently.
All right, thank you. We have here with us Sujit Menon, who is with Air Asia. Sujit, over to you to ask your question. You can unmute and speak.
Thank you, Professor. Good evening, Videh sir. Nice to have you here, and it's always a pleasure hearing you on these sort of seminars. Sir, just a quick question. Uh, Post lockdown, we had the several issues with the different state governments, because we had each and every state governments had its own quarantine regulations, the new requirements. So, what is your take on that? Was it advisable to have one single regulation across all the states, or you would have still continued the state governments to follow their own regulations? What is your take, sir?
We had always advocated that there should be one uniform uh, protocol across all the states. And in fact, even Ministry of Civil Aviation was in agreement with that. However, health being a subject which is both a state as well as central. So states had the freedom to actually mandate something on a localized basis. However, current situation is that most of the states have become uniform, except that suddenly now Maharashtra has come out with this RT-PCR testing for people coming from a certain locations. That also, in fact, bureaucracy had agreed, and we had a meeting along with Ministry of Civil Aviation, that why should there be separate rules for people coming by train and people coming by air travel? Because for trains, only symptomatic people are supposed to be tested as antigen. Whereas for air traveler, everybody needs to be tested for RT-PCR. So
Yes,
in
sir.
principle, they had agreed. But I think there are some compulsions because of public image is why it's still continuing. So you're absolutely right that to reduce confusion of passengers, we should ideally have a uniform protocol across the states, but it's difficult to achieve.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Sujit. I now hand over to Mr. Ernest Fernandez, who's a very senior industry veteran and a former past president of the Bombay Management Association. Over to you, Mr. Fernandez.
Very fascinating account. And what I'd like to ask is, what are the facilities at an airport, like, for example, cafeteria, duty-free shops? Are they all open or are they closed?
Everything is open, sir, and ready to welcome you.
Oh, thank you.
We have put actually social distance marking inside each of the shop. There are certain protocols that each one of them is following to make sure that there is enough safety inside. We are also encouraging passengers as well as shops to go for digital payment. We have actually launched an app also, Hoi app, with which you can pre-book and you can pay also online. So all those safety measures we have put in place.
Thank you.
I guess a related question is, are there going to be changes in norms if one is going to be flying with pets? Have there been some norms already suggested?
Professor Mani, this is a bouncer for me, so I will have to come.
Done. You are allowed to duck it and no problem at all. Nothing to worry. We will.
But I have not heard of any change in the pets regulation.
Okay. I understand. So that's wonderful. I think that was a very honest answer. Another thing which we'd like to ask you is, was managing the passengers a bigger challenge or managing the staff of the various airlines, etc.? Which was more difficult? I know it's another small bouncer, but just to understand mindsets.
No, it's not a small bouncer.
Okay.
See, fact is that whether it's airlines or anybody else operating at the airport, we have a common business. So managing other stakeholders who have common purpose is that much easier if you are logically actually interacting with them, listening to them. And that is something that we pride ourselves in, because you might be aware that Delhi Airport has been rated as the best in customer service for the last 3 years across the world. it cannot happen unless you have got all the stakeholders with you, because their actual experience is managed when they actually get down at the airport and CISF person actually checks his entry pass, and then they check in at the airline's counter, and then there is a security check, and then there is immigration. All these people have to work together to actually give that kind of a passenger experience. So that was an easy part till the time you logically worked with them, and everybody's interest was to make sure that the best passenger experience is given. It was the passengers who were coming to airport with lot of worries. In fact, initial stages, almost 40% of the people who were traveling were the ones who were stuck in different areas because of a sudden lockdown. So they were away from their family, stuck in different places, in hotels, in other places. They were desperate to go back home. So their anxiety levels were that much higher. Slowly, as things eased out and you had the normal traveler and you had the profile which was matching your pre-COVID time, then those people are used to the airport. So then it was that much easier to handle them also.
Right. I guess these are two different sets of anxieties, as you did explain. And I also remember you saying that sometimes managing the family was as challenging as managing the individual, because the anxiety levels were very high in the initial points in time. The next question here is, you just mentioned that there were multiple stakeholders you had to manage. One was a government, one was quasi-government, one was the private customer, one was the passenger. Now, could you share one or two more experiences on how you managed to build this synergy, considering that if you are ranked second in terms of the safest airport, you have done something magical?
I will give you one simple example of international arriving passengers. So, because that was something which was completely path-breaking. International arriving passengers were supposed to submit what is called a self-declaration form. Then there were certain categories under which they were supposed to get exemption. Now, for this exemption, they had to apply to government health officials from Delhi government who were actually sitting there, who were checking each of those documents. This self-declaration form was supposed to be submitted to airport health official, then submitted to immigration officer, and then submitted to Delhi government. So overall waiting time, in spite of doing the best, was close to about 6 hours. And to manage so many passengers, what CISF, which is entrusted with the in-terminal security and management, they were making a passenger groups of 30 and had one officer who was actually in charge of those 30. It was a nightmare, to say the least. I have seen my relatives coming down and it was a nightmare, but nothing could be done. So in one of the meetings, we suggested that why don't you make all this online? Because if there is online submission of this self-declaration form, online submission of any request for exemption, it can be processed before the passenger actually lands at the airport. So ministry came back and said that, listen, if I do it through NIC, which is the government body, it will take us 6 months to actually make an app like that. Why don't you do it? So we said, okay, fine, we will do it in 2 weeks' time. So we created Air Suvidha, where we had to actually get a buy-in from everybody, Ministry of Civil Aviation, all the state government health officials. We had meeting with each and every state government health official that this is what passenger will submit. In the back end, it will flow to your health officials. Let the health officials take 24 hours of time and give a pre-approval so that the message goes back to the passenger. And then we created a green channel where whosoever has got pre-approval can actually show it on their mobile and just go through like normal days. Today, 80% of our exemptions are actually done through that. 85% of the passengers coming from abroad put their self-declaration form online. So the same form actually flows to whichever official wants that form.
I understand.
So this is something which actually was appreciated. In fact, it was appreciated by Foreign Ministry, it was appreciated by Home Ministry, Ministry of Civil Aviation, because it actually reduced waiting time from 6 hours to on an average 1 hour, which earlier also used to be 45 minutes. So possibly 5-10 minutes additional.
I understand. That's wonderful. I think that's a very relevant example, which has really reduced a lot of pain that the people used to go through. Over to Indrapalji again. He's our past president and a very senior industry veteran from Godrej. Over to you, Indrapalji.
First, congratulations, Mr. Kumar. I think this is one of the most fascinating case studies that we have heard over many, many months here. And I think it should be replicated not only in India, but it should be replicated particularly in the Western world. Because I have always felt that our incoming, what you call the passenger experience at the immigration counter is one of the best. For example, at the Heathrow, you may take something like 45 minutes to get in, while we are out here in 8 to 10 minutes or something like that. So I think our airports have done in the past also wonderful work. And now with this kind of innovation that you described just a few minutes back, that everything should be pre-approved and, a green channel and fast movement, I think many, many countries can learn from your experiments and your experience. So I think congratulations are there in order to your entire team for this fascinating work. I hope this case study gets attention of some leading business schools and they convert as to how you have reacted to that. But sadly, I think in the press, we have not read much about it, this success and this coordination, I think, which is a very, very important part. And it can serve as a model to speed up so many other similar processes. For example, railways can pick up a point or two, and so is many municipal corporations and so on and so forth. So I suppose you'll have to tell your agencies to do more publicity of this wonderful work done, and being ranked second in the world, we should be proud of, and next to Singapore is something absolutely, people used to say that Singapore experience is something you have to pay for to get it. Now I think we have to just travel to Delhi to see it. And that's a very fascinating thing, I suppose.
Thank you.
So I have in fact no real question in that sense, but I would say that how this taking stakeholders on the board can do wonders. And I suppose that could be a pointer to solving the farmers' problem, not taking the stakeholders on the board. And you have a Delhi struggling to get fruits and vegetables in the city. So I think it's a fascinating learning. I hope you will be documenting it in more detail than what you have shared with us in this half an hour talk. Because those innovations that you mentioned, they are really worthy, of recording and sharing.
Yes, sir. We have actually documented most of the things, because as I said right in the beginning, that this is not the last epidemic that we are looking at.
Yeah.
So these learnings, they have to become part of our crisis management manual.
And Mitroff has been one of my favorite authors. And I was very happy to see his name on a slide, because people have forgotten him. But he's a very distinguished professor at the Ivy League, one of the colleges. And his book on crisis management was one of the first ones. And when I had first seen it, I was wondering that why this professor has chosen to write a book on Mitroff. But he's been very, very great thing. I think anyone who's interested in the academic side of it should really Google and get hold of all his books. One of the most insightful academicians that one can come across. He has written one lovely book called Unbounded Mind, and it's really mind-boggling. And he's talking very extensively about untapped human potential. And I think this example that you have given, you have really succeeded in tapping potential, because this kind of innovation cannot be thought of even by one person. So how do you sanitize a bag? How do you do this? It's 1,001 problems. Unless everyone is on board, nothing can happen.
Absolutely, sir. That is something, if you give people to come out and implement what they think will work, actually people go out of the way and stretch themselves in terms of actually implementing things which could be very, very different from the way you would have normally thought. So that has been my learning most of my life.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I think this faith in people's capability to align and do something wonderful is we need to tap into it much more than what we have been doing. Even in terms of managing COVID itself, I mean, in the cities and elsewhere, if we leave some part of the problem to the people, making them, like you rightly said in one of your slides, making people part of the solution rather than treating them as a problem, I think that makes all the difference. I think that makes all the difference.
Right.
So thank you so much, sir. I mean, it's a wonderful experience. I'm so happy that, our capital, and I think this is something we can proudly stand in the world forums, that this is what we have done.
All right. Great. Thank you, Indrapalji, for all that observation. And I think it was wonderful spending this 1 hour with you, Videh. I think it was absolutely straight from the heart, and that's what made it more appealing to every one of us who was attending this session. Special mention to Vaijanti for having made this evening happen by connecting her to, as she said, her good old classmate from JBIMS. And Videh, thank you so much for the wonderful sharing, which has opened so many eyes and given us so many ideas for people to implement even back at their own workplaces. As we come to a conclusion of this wonderful learning session, may I request everyone to put on their videos so that we have a group photograph, though digitally, so that we can capture this moment, this evening, that we spent learning some new things from Videh about the wonderful transformational experience. Please give our digital photography team about 2 minutes to cover the 3 screens that we have here so that we can capture as many of you who are present this evening. I'd hand over to Indrila and Supriya to please do the honors. And while we get ready for this group photograph, may I inform you that this Friday is a very interesting program again on the Friday Fundamentals segment, where we are talking about managing all the current scenario and how to overcome the situation using some principles from the armed forces. So we have a commander and a commodore from the armed forces making this presentation. I'm sure you got the mailers and we are looking forward to your presence this Friday. Next Wednesday in our series of Wednesday webinars continuing, we have a very senior person, a director from KPMG, Nisat, who's going to be talking to us about the 5th dimension at work. Come and check it out as she shares some interesting inputs with us when she's there with us next week on the Wednesday Wisdom webinars. The calendar for Wednesday and Friday is almost full for the month of December. Please check up all the details and join us for different programs that we have during the course of this month. I guess we're almost done with 1, 2 screens, and just give us another half a minute before we complete this capturing of our times together. Thank you once again, and thank you very much, Videh, on behalf of all of us, and we look forward to our continued interaction. And please convey our heartiest congratulations to your team on this wonderful accolade. Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Professor Mani.